It is my pleasure to introduce Mayor Eric Papadopoulos with the City of Harrisburg. And I will tell you that Mayor Papadopoulos has been with us for many, many years in providing a State of the City address to the Leadership Harrisburg area classes. It's quite an honor to have his presence here when I know your schedule is extremely busy. I'll tell you that last year's class did not have the benefit of Mayor Papadopoulos' presentation because it was right when the pandemic hit. We didn't know what we were doing, and you had your hands full.
It's pretty busy. Yeah.
Yes, you had your hands full at that time. So I'm so thankful that you're back again this year, and I hope that you all will clear your distractions and give all of your focus and attention to the mayor of the City of Harrisburg for our next presentation. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you. Right.
Great. I guess you can all hear me. I'm sorry that. Well, I'm glad to be here. I will take my mask off now. You guys are so well spread apart, and we've got such a big room here. But yeah, I've done this every year, I guess, except for last year, and it's really been, it's a fun thing to do, and I'm going to have to go back and watch the old videos, because it really tells the story of the city's progress over the last 7 years. I've been mayor now, and ending my second term in office, and we've come tremendously far away. Well, I thought I would address a number of different topics. I'll talk about the city's financial recovery, because that's important. And we just had the Pennsylvania Economy League on, so we can talk a little bit about our finances. I'll talk about the city's COVID response and hopefully post-COVID economic recovery. And we'll talk a little bit about the expansion of city services and maybe police reform, and then I'll take your questions, because these are all the hot topics of the day. Actually just came from a ribbon cutting in Harrisburg. We haven't had too many of those lately, but it was a brand new business that was opening in the downtown, and we're really excited for them. And I think it is a sign that people are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. You guys are a pretty young group, but by a show of hands, who's gotten their vaccine already? Maybe the first dose? Yeah, see, that's pretty good. So as I said, it's a healthy young group, and the vaccine accessibility has really opened up, and that's good to see. So much so that I think by the summer we'll be in an even better place for the city. And the city just announced that we're going to return to festivals in a small way. We're going to have Arts Fest this year, but we're going to do it with social distancing, and we're going to have it on the island and not have it expand all throughout the downtown. But it should be a good sign of recovery here. So that's coming up on Memorial Day weekend. But let's talk about the city's finances first, because this is something that I'm particularly proud of. You know, when I first gave this talk, the first year, and first came to office, the city was for all intents and purposes bankrupt. We've been taken over by the Commonwealth. We were in receivership, which is what the school district is in now, but it basically meant that the then corporate administration was running the city. And we had the highest per capita debt of anywhere in the world, level of the United States of America. It was ridiculous. Hundreds of millions of dollars, $800 million for an impoverished population of about 50,000 people. It was so bad that we were making headlines for all the wrong reasons. I know this because I just did an interview with the BBC about infrastructure, Biden's infrastructure plans. And when I went to Google Harrisburg and see the stories that they'd done in Harrisburg, it was about Wild West artifacts, bankruptcy, more Wild West artifacts, and it was basically, and then it made its way up to the stealing of Nancy Pelosi's laptop. That's where Harrisburg was making national news, unfortunately. But now, it's how we're going to spend infrastructure dollars and how we're going to continue our recovery. So we've come a long way. Nobody wanted to work for the city. Our morale was at an all-time low, and we had tens of millions of dollars in unpaid bills. I was even handed a budget that wasn't balanced, that was basically told, good luck. We didn't have any history of any type of balanced budgets, let alone any type of savings. And slowly but surely, we built our way back. We've had a balanced budget every year for the last 7 years. So much so that when we were hit with COVID, which was an extraordinary, scary moment, we actually had resources on hand that we could get out to businesses and people before any other community in Pennsylvania, in part because we didn't have to wait for the federal CARES Act money with all the strings attached to that. We had cash on hand. We could put that into the pocket. I'll talk about the COVID response in a minute. But we did something pretty remarkable last year, which is that we officially solved the city's long-time structural deficit. And there are a couple things that you should know about Harrisburg if you're studying Harrisburg in the region. The first is that more than half of the value of the property in Harrisburg is tax exempt. And that's because, not only because of the state, but a lot of nonprofits, and we're sort of regional center for many nonprofits and churches and other tax exempt entities. Which means that our tax base right out of the gate is very small. So that's one thing you need to know about Harrisburg. The other thing you need to know about Harrisburg is that we are a relatively poor city with a relatively small population. The region is very wealthy, and through the process of suburbanization, we have all of these other municipalities that surround Harrisburg. But geographically, we're a relatively landlocked, small city with a population of about 50,000 people, more than half of which live in poverty, or very close to the poverty line. And the other thing you should know about Harrisburg is that our population, when we're not in COVID, our population doubles during the workday, which is an interesting dynamic, right? So more people come to work in Harrisburg than actually live in Harrisburg. And this is true for a lot of cities, but it's not quite as extreme as it is in Harrisburg. And the tax exempt proportions aren't quite as extreme as they are in Harrisburg. So all of this adds up for Harrisburg having basically a long history of not having enough revenue to come in to match the expenses that are necessary to run city government. And the way that we solved this past legislative session was we were able to convince a bipartisan group of legislators, including Gerald Lozier, I saw her on the list of people that spoke to you before, to vote to basically have people who don't live in the city, but who come to work in the city, contribute to the city's tax base. And that's an extraordinary accomplishment, because if you look back at what got Harrisburg into the financial mess that we got in, yeah, you probably heard of the incinerator, and I made fun of the artifacts and all the crazy spending, but at its heart, it was a desire to mask that structural deficit, to borrow here to basically so that we could balance a budget or do something risky, get into the trash incineration business for the whole purpose of trying to generate revenue, to try and get us out of that structural deficit. And we did it the right way, which is we did it with the support of all of central Pennsylvania. So if you work in the city of Harrisburg, yes, you pay an elevated local services tax now, but it really amounts to the cost of 1 cup of coffee a week. That's all it really takes. For all those workers, they pay a little extra, the cost of 1 cup of coffee a week, and suddenly we generate millions of dollars through that, and that has allowed us to have a structurally balanced budget. And now that we have a structurally balanced budget, and we can do that without having to raise taxes any further, because, as you know, real estate taxes are already very high, and most of the taxes that people pay in the city of Harrisburg, they don't go to the city, they go to the school district. That's a whole other topic. But we can't raise them any higher because people are already sort of taxed out. So we needed this additional source of income. It's allowing us to leave sort of distressed city status. And the Economy League was an organization of many which tried to help the city sort of get back on its feet. But nobody had a solution other than the solution which the legislature gave us. And they gave us a new law which nobody else has in anywhere in Pennsylvania. And it was largely because of those 3 factors that I described, and the case that we made on the Hill with our lobbyists and our team, that really you needed strong and healthy capital with a sustainable amount of revenue in order to have a strong and healthy region, and in order to make headlines for the right reasons. So that is really, really exciting. And it is also allowing us to, for the first time, we're going to be able to get a credit rating. And we're going to be approaching credit rating agencies this summer. We've interviewed and put out an RFP for underwriters, and we may be able to borrow again, and borrow responsibly. Not borrow irresponsibly, but borrow responsibly. Normally, when cities need to do things like pave roads or do major infrastructure improvements, they borrow. And then they put those dollars right back into those collective community improvements that we want to see, because they're otherwise too expensive to simply pay for with cash on hand. And we're going to be able to get those things, a credit rating, and to be able to borrow this coming year. So that's a big, big milestone for the city. And there's been a lot of deferred maintenance in Harrisburg. And I could share some staggering figures with you. We have a combined wastewater, stormwater system in Harrisburg you probably know something about. But it basically means when it rains really heavily and the water all goes into the storm drains, it mixes with the sewer lines, and it can pollute the Susquehanna River. The capacity just isn't enough to handle all that water at once, and it discharges into the river. The river then, of course, pollutes the Chesapeake Bay, and you have an environmental problem which impacts much more than just the residents of Harrisburg. And one of the, we'll talk a little bit about President Biden and his agenda, but one of the plans for this new infrastructure bill that they're discussing right now in Congress is more money for water, sewer, and green infrastructure to be able to collectively try and solve a problem like that. Because if you think about it, Harrisburg's population, here's another statistic, Harrisburg's population is half of what it was in the 1950s. And certainly half of what it was when this infrastructure was new and, and not falling apart like it is today. And those people that originally built the infrastructure for Harrisburg moved to the suburbs. And really we need a collective solution. It can't just be the Harrisburg taxpayers to pay for these longstanding infrastructure issues with water and sewer. It has to be a national or a federal or regional approach, because the benefit is accrued to everyone. As we said, the whole world, if you're not including the Chesapeake Bay. So that's the number to fix the combined water sewer system, to fix it like entirely, is like $1 billion. And to fix it incrementally and better, it's still hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's just one of these sort of long-term costs the city has. Our streets and roads, we recently did a survey of all the streets and roads in Harrisburg. We've got miles, and even though it's a geographically compact city, we've got awful streets and roads. The cost to pave just the streets and roads in Harrisburg that need to be paved and have already failed, not the ones that are in decent shape and maybe going to fail in the future, that's over $100 million just to do that. And here's another stat. We have about 350 currently condemned buildings in Harrisburg. And that's not just vacant buildings. These are buildings that are uninhabitable and probably, in most cases, unrestorable. And that's hundreds of those. That would cost another $15 to $20 million to take all of those down. I'm giving you big numbers because it shows you that some of the long-standing issues for the city, infrastructure, light, streets, and roads, they take real dollars to fix. And we are now in a position to do that. Not only do we balance our own budget and solve our structural deficit, but now we can borrow again to be able to do those things. And that's one of the reasons I'm looking forward to the next several years, because we're finally going to be able to address a lot of those long-standing issues. And that's part of the city's fiscal financial recovery. And it ties to the second topic that I wanted to tell you a little bit about, which was our COVID response. Because of the American Rescue Plan dollars, which are going to be coming to the city of Harrisburg, the ones that have already been approved via the current stimulus, which is the regulations for which are being written as we speak. And I just spoke to Leanne as she was leaving, and she said she spoke to you all a little bit about these dollars, but I can tell you, having spoken to Senator Casey and others, we don't actually know all of the things that they're going to be eligible for, because those regulations are still in development. There's a lot of money put for the problem, but not a lot of specificity quite yet on how we can spend it. But nonetheless, Harrisburg is supposed to get $48 million. And that's what's already been approved from the American Rescue Plan. And if you look at what they're talking about in terms of this, again, $1 trillion federal transportation plan that Biden announced, the one I was talking about with the BBC, that could be tens of millions of dollars more. And it could very well be able to be used for our streets and our roads and for flight and for other forms of public infrastructure, get people back to work. So you have a stimulus, but you also have, right now, an unprecedented amount of actual planned development in the process in Harrisburg. If you go to our city, you see the cranes in the air, which weren't there even just a few years ago. You've got new archives and a new courthouse, and you've got this new state office building, and then you've got a major renovation of other buildings, you've got new affordable housing projects. But you add all this up, it's about $750 million worth of projects that are currently through zoning and in the process of being built. And so on the one hand, COVID sort of caused a delay, but on the other hand, it's been, this has been a time of rising real estate values, of lower interest rates, of basically, it could be a real boom time for development in the city. And I think we're going to see, for sure, a post-COVID bounce for the economy. We're going to see a lot of opportunities, a lot of jobs, and I know everybody is just dying, looking forward to it, including that business owner that I mentioned before, where I cut the ribbon just a few hours ago. But the city will be back, and the state workers will be back, and the downtown will be thriving again. But one of the advantages about having a balanced budget, having some cash in my hand, was that when COVID hit, and I guess we had to cancel, a year ago we had to cancel our talk to this group, and we're just reimagining everything. When COVID hit, we did have resources that we could get out. We took city cash. We were the first city in Pennsylvania to get money out to small businesses. And we gave grants to small businesses, not loans. We sort of gave them no strings attached early on to hundreds of businesses throughout Harrisburg. Everyone who qualified a Harrisburg business got one if they could show that they had been impacted negatively by COVID. And that was pretty much every sector except maybe the grocery business and a handful of other businesses that actually saw an increase under COVID. But we got that money out very quickly. And we've done some other things that are sort of precedent setting in Harrisburg. Yes, we've had rental relief programs, we've had other things, but we've also had an eviction moratorium in Harrisburg that maybe you've heard about, which is stronger than anything else in Pennsylvania and stronger than the federal and national guidelines. And basically has said that you cannot be thrown out of where you live in Harrisburg for any financial reason at all. And this has been a hardship for some landlords and for others, but it was necessary as part of the health emergency response not to make things worse. We didn't want to put more people on the streets. We didn't want to make the health emergency worse. We didn't want to have more homelessness. We didn't want to have evictions amidst this health emergency. And I have been renewing that at 30-day intervals since the start of the year, and we may be looking at one more 30-day extension. We're almost at the end because it was never meant to be a permanent moratorium. It was meant to get us to the other side where we needed to be. And my metric for extending it has to do with vaccine accessibility, which was interesting when everybody raised their hand. So I think we're almost to the point, and I think Governor Wolf would agree with this, almost to the point where everybody who wants the vaccine will have access to it soon. And at that point, I think we'll be safe to begin processing in an orderly way evictions in Harrisburg, but we haven't had that for a long time. And we did work with landlords to help get them payments through our rental relief program, which was the sort of flip side of it. Yes, you couldn't get rid of somebody for non-payment of rent, but we had funds available to help them pay the rent. And we'll have more funds available to help people pay the rent moving forward, because that is an eligible activity under the American Rescue Plan, that $48 million, which may be coming in the next 30 days. It's quite a windfall. It's a windfall for cities, and frankly, it's long overdue. It's a very important investment. We can talk about that if you guys have any questions about it. The city's COVID response has been strong. We've had to learn to communicate in different ways, have meetings like everyone else virtually, and deal with things. But we've managed to pass some very important legislation. We've had good conversations and discussions on affordable housing, and this is affordable housing legislation and incentives are very, very promising. We passed a community citizens review board for our police, and these were all things that we were able to do even in a virtual setting through Zoom. And one of the other sort of potentially positive benefits of COVID, if you could say that, is that we've seen more people engage in local politics than ever before. And maybe this is surprising to you, maybe it isn't, but in reality, it's actually a little more accessible for people to, tune into a virtual meeting at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday rather than to drive downtown, find a place to park, and have to go in person and make your public comments. So we had more comments over the summer on certain pieces of legislation than we had, I think, all the entire year before in terms of public commentary. And I remember when I gave my budget, not this past budget, but the one the year before COVID, I had 0 public comments. I mean, there wasn't a single one. This year, there were dozens. So you also see that, I won't get too political, but you do see that in the current political atmosphere where you have a lot more people running for office. And that's a good thing. That's a sign that people want to engage in the political process. I think we have like 13 or 14 candidates running for city council at the moment. That's really great, because there was a time when really nobody wanted to be involved in Harrisburg politics, and that's changing. And that's a good thing. And you guys, and your interest in this class, which is obviously fully subscribed, is a good sign about people wanting to be connected and engaged in what's happening in Harrisburg and the region. So a couple other just quick topics before we get to your questions. One of the things I am proudest of over the past several years, and something that we've continued to do, including last year, even amidst COVID, is this growth and expansion of city services. Especially, we've entered into a number of intergovernmental agreements with surrounding municipalities, which I think are the future for Pennsylvania, the future for governance in our region. I mean, let's face it, we have too many municipalities. We're not going to be, too many school districts, too many divisions of government, too many, not enough collaboration and not enough of the benefits of everybody working together. And we can't change all of that, and people aren't going to, we're not going to merge municipalities or change boundaries. But what we can do is we can work together to share services and to get the advantages of, bidding on things together. And you can have regional police forces or regional fire departments, or in the example of Harrisburg. One of the things that we're doing now is that we've expanded our city sanitation services in a way which I think has been a great benefit to everyone. We started in Steelton, and this past year, sort of impressed with what had happened in Steelton, where the residents of Steelton got a lesser cost and an excellent service for the city of Harrisburg than they were paying in the private sector. And we can offer sanitation services at a lesser cost because the city doesn't need to make a profit, and the private sector doesn't need to make a profit. And we can talk a little bit about, the various pushes for privatization and when that's a good thing, when that's not a good thing. But with regard to municipal services, just basic essential municipal services, I would say it's not a good thing, and I would say that we can gain a lot by sharing services. So a borough like Paxton, which came to us, they also use the Swidera Police Department for their policing. So they have an intergovernmental agreement with them with policing, an intergovernmental agreement with us for the sanitation services. These things really, really make sense. And for us, adding a Pembroke or a Paxton or even a Steelton is just like adding one more neighborhood in Harrisburg. It's not that complicated. It's like a small amount of population compared to the city. It's one more route, one more series of trucks and drivers, and we can see great compatibility there. That's allowed us to basically increase our number of employees in the city, and through that increase, subsidized by the funds that we're getting in from other municipalities, We may have a sanitation collector who gets to work 1 day a week for Paxton or Pembroke, but then he can work, or she can work 4 days a week for the residents of Harrisburg. And we can do more things like cut the grass in our parks and playgrounds and improve those and invest across the board in in cleaning up Harrisburg and doing more things. But building that capacity and extending those intergovernmental agreements. And I think there's more to come on that. I'm really excited about it. I think the fire service is an area where we need to look, especially when you see the decline of the volunteer fire service, and you have a very professionalized fire department in Harrisburg. It's an expensive thing to have a professional fire department, but we have it, and how it gives mutual aid and how it interacts with other municipalities is the way of the future. We can expand and we can train, and we have the professionals to help with that. So that's something to think about and to look at. And let me talk just a little bit about police reform, because this has been a hot button topic in Harrisburg as well. Obviously, all of us watched through the summer the sort of horrific and discouraging sights throughout the country. We did have many demonstrations in Harrisburg, and I was proud to be out there sort of side by side with the governor when he walked through Harrisburg's streets in support of Black Lives Matter. But part of the takeaways of the whole movement was that we need to improve our policies across the board. And we did some initiatives in Harrisburg. For instance, we followed President Obama's lead, who he sort of challenged mayors in the early stages of the Black Lives Matter movement over the summer to make public their use of force policies and to engage the community in a discussion about what he was calling 8 can't wait, which are sort of, I won't get too detailed, but basically these are like the 8 principles that all use of force policies, best policy practices for use of force policies, banning chokeholds and emphasizing de-escalation, all these types of things. Now, Harrisburg was fortunate. We had already a very progressive use of force policy, but we were able to improve it, and we had comments submitted publicly over the course of the summer, and we revised it through general orders, and that's sort of the foundation, for you will, of policing, because that's the order in which police officers work and interact with the community. Another thing that we did was we finally, and I say finally because I've been in support of this for years, but finally City Council passed a community review board, which is meant to basically provide a measure of oversight, but also a connection between the police and the community by having a group of informed citizens be able to weigh in and mediate and be a part of our policing strategy as we move forward. And that's something which I think is a good thing. City Council is in the process of collecting applications for that. You have to be a city resident. You have to have one per policing district in the city, and there's some other rules, and they have the power to appoint. And I don't, but I'm there to be supportive of it. I get a couple of appointees at the end, but they appoint the first batch. And that'll be important. And then in this current budget, we expanded a couple really important programs. One is the co-responder program, which has to do with having social workers and trained professionals riding alongside, mental health professionals riding alongside police officers. We have the largest contingent of that anywhere in our county, and we tripled the size of what we had before. We had sort of a pilot program before the summer, and we've really put a lot of time and attention there. And the goal there is to divert certain types of interactions from the entire criminal justice system to begin with, because really it should be, whether it's certain matters of substance abuse or mental health or you name it, these things should be handled differently, and we should be asking our uniformed police officers to try and be sort of everything to everyone, and we should have trained professionals deal with some of those calls. And so that's what we're doing, and that's what we're funding. And we've also created a whole new civilianized department in in the Harrisburg Police Department, something that we've never had before, to sort of complement, right alongside our uniform patrol. We're calling these community service aides, and again, these are non-uniformed citizens, private citizens, that are going to be part of dealing with certain types of complaints and other types of quality of life issues. You name it, from I don't know, noise complaints to parking questions to clean up, sanitation. You work with other types of codes and sanitation enforcement officers, answer phones, engage with community groups, do the type of work which again we can sort of take away from our uniform division and help hopefully strengthen bonds and partnerships with communities. And now that we have more resources, because we have this balanced budget and things are moving forward, we're able to do more to invest in community groups, community organizations, and nonprofits and others, and they are eligible for some of the funding that we talked about at the beginning too, this American Rescue Plan funding. So those are the big topics that are currently before Harrisburg, and that's been about half an hour, so I think that's pretty good for just talking away. So let's do some dialogue and back and forth and questions. And frankly, I see your agenda and all the interesting conversations and topics that you have had over the course of the day, and I assume over the course of the whole class. So perhaps there are things that are on your mind, questions you have about Harrisburg, ideas, things you want to tell me about why you're inspired to become a leader. Just raise your hand and we'll figure out how the microphone works. And, we'll take questions for a little bit. Sound good? All right, sir. Should I bring you the microphone? No.
Speak up.
Just speak loudly. There we go. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the progression of the construction on 2nd Street, what the timeline is for that, and then also any future hopes and dreams for along 6th Street once the new courthouse and the archives are built?
Okay, great. Yeah, two of my favorite topics. That's great. So there was a time long ago when 2nd Street in Harrisburg, and when we're talking about 2nd Street, we're talking about 2nd Street north of Foster Street, so north of the Harvey Taylor Bridge, not the 2nd Street that's in the immediate downtown. But there was a time when that was a two-way street. It is currently a two-way street if you go north of Division in Harrisburg, testing everybody's geography here. When the city underwent a lot of the sort of transportation planning of the 1950s that I think really impacted urban centers across America. This is something that Mayor Pete has talked a lot about as Secretary of Transportation, which is reversing some of these just bad strategic decisions that put super highways and downtowns and cut communities off from the natural landscape of the river. Basically 2nd Street was turned into a highway, a multi-lane highway that got people out of the city as quickly as possible. And it cut off what was a residential neighborhood, still is a residential neighborhood, from being able to be safely connected to the river. And another street, which is equally badly designed, is State Street, which we are also fixing this year. I'll give you the time schedule, but that also multi-lane superhighway in which people go, twice the speed limit in an effort to either get out of Harrisburg as quickly as possible or get in as quickly as possible. But it cuts through a residential neighborhood. It's not safe for people to cross, and State Street and 2nd Street have both been on what we have as a sort of high injury network. We've used data to sort of chart and plot where the safest and least safe places are for pedestrians and bicyclists and others in Harrisburg. And I would say the second in Front Street, Foster Street area there is probably the highest crash prone and the most fatalities are on State Street. And basically these need to be redesigned. And ever since I was elected, I wanted to redesign 2nd Street and move it to a two-way street and redirect a lot of the commuter traffic up to 7th Street, which was originally planned to be wider and had a lot of upgrades made, but then no traffic was really directed to it. It's one of the most beautiful, underutilized streets in the city. But we're changing that, and that's the plan. It required a lot of funding, multi-millions of dollars, much of which came from the state. It required traffic studies. It required community buy-in, and we adopted something called Vision Zero, which is a community transportation plan, which is with the goal of having 0 fatalities for pedestrians anywhere in the city. And that's governed a lot of the things that you've seen. Every transportation project that we do, we've been adding things like bike lanes or green infrastructure, or bump outs, or new crosswalks, or new traffic signal improvements, and all of these things to try and make Harrisburg safer and more walkable and bikeable, and not as reliant on just in and out use of the car. So that was a little bit of historic background to say that we have awarded the contracts. We awarded the contract for 2nd Street. Prior to 2nd Street going 2 ways, which is underway now. You see the construction on 2nd Street right at the moment. By the way, when you do a major road improvement project, you also have to bring the street up to ADA compliance. So what they're doing now on 2nd Street is they're replacing every single ramp at every intersection, all up and down that multi-mile stretch of North 2nd Street. So every single ramp and sidewalk and curb, and all this is going to get fixed so that you basically can allow people to get from one place to another, which is not ADA accessible currently, and costs a lot of money, frankly. I think it's like $15,000 or $20,000 a ramp to fix, to properly make each corner ADA accessible in the city. So it's a lot to do. That's underway. They're starting with the sides, the curbs, the ramps, before they get into the main right-of-way of 2nd Street. And we're also trying to finish a project that we have on 7th Street first, before we convert 2nd Street to 2 ways, which is removing that whole section of metered parking that is out in front of Fiat, which is sort of in the middle of the street, and it's very confusing why you would put parking spaces in the middle of a multi-lane street. Never made a lot of sense. So all that is currently being removed. And yes, we're going to have our first roundabout in Harrisburg at the corner there of Riley and the courthouse. It's something that federal courthouse is sort of excited about. It'll be good. You'll get used to it. It's going to be a complete redesign there. And so 7th Street is in line with what's going on 2nd Street. Right now, the 2-way conversion is called for the spring, because they're going to do a final repave of the whole, and I mean next spring. I mean next year. They're going to be working all through this year on everything, and then they will pave and convert. That's the last thing that they do. Then you asked about the courthouse. That's perfect timing for the courthouse, because the courthouse is also supposed to open sometime, I guess, in the summer of next year. Maybe a little bit delayed, but it's going to be open. So at that point, 2nd Street will be converted, 7th Street will be done, and have the improvements, and you're going to see this new courthouse. Now, the courthouse poses a lot of great opportunity because they've done traffic studies and other types of. Basically, when all the juries are in session and when that courthouse is humming with everything and all the activity, they expect you to bring about 800 people on a daily basis, which are 800 people that aren't currently in that part of the city. And so that has now spurred a project that was just on the agenda for City Council last night, which is a new parking garage complex, which is not just a parking garage. It's a parking garage with a first floor grocery store and upper floor affordable and market rate housing in a sort of very innovative multi-use type design and way, which is exciting. It would go on that block basically between 6th Street and 5th Street. Yeah, 6th Street and 4th Street. And then further down on those empty parking lots, there's a whole other project which has been proposed for more housing. And this ties into the bit I was talking about, affordable housing. We are trying to incentivize affordable housing. We're not trying to mandate it. We want housing of all types, and we want to grow the city's population, in part because we have, again, half the population that we once had. There's room to absolutely grow, and ultimately that's how you can have a more sustainable tax base. But we want to encourage developers like this parking garage developer or the other developer on Riley Street that if they're going to do their project, consider having some of the units at a more affordable rate. And the proposed bills that we have incentivize that by saying things like, if you're willing to commit to, say, 2 out of 10 at a more affordable rate, that's the minimum, 20% would be the minimum to be able to do it, then we'll give you certain things. We'll give you a density bonus, we'll give you zoning relief, which basically means you can go a little higher, you can be a little denser, maybe you don't have to do as much parking. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do there. We'll also give you a tax incentive, which means we'll make it easier for you to qualify for tax abatement. And we'll give you a sort of an expedited process for your land development plan and your street vacations and that sort of thing, which often happens. And it's not too much, but altogether, it really it might be enough to say, yeah, I think in exchange for that, I can definitely keep the prices down. And we want to see that citywide, so we don't price anyone out of any particular neighborhood, while at the same time we increase the housing stock in every neighborhood. And this is so that's a big deal. So that's what's happening in that 6th Street corridor now. But I think you'll start to see even more sort of pushing down the corridor all the way down to the Clay. And that is an area which has been basically undeveloped for years. And our comprehensive plan for the city calls for that. And it's also on a ridge, which geographically maybe you can envision. It's, we're out of the floodplain. That's for them, right? And it's sort of the high point in Harrisburg. It sort of goes down, slopes down to the train tracks, down to the river. But it's a great opportunity for dense development. And it's not just the courthouses, the archives as well, and it's the cumulative investment and some of the other infrastructure investment that I think is going to make that really, really attractive. But it's one area in Harrisburg where you have a lot of empty land, so you're not displacing anybody at all. You're actually building up in areas where people used to live. So really, really exciting. And just quickly on State Street, that is also happening this year. That is a road diet, which is taking away one lane in each direction. It's sort of replacing the bike lanes, which are, sometimes they're popular, sometimes they're not, but the goal is to shrink the distance that people have to cross, because that will make it safer for them to cross, coupled with new lighting, new signals, new crosswalks, new pedestrian refuges, that sort of thing. So, okay. Yes, to you.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
Longtime resident.
Yes.
We live pretty close to one another, so you and your wife walking
Yes.
often. To dovetail the question about 2nd Street, I've actually reached out to the folks running against you to ask this question, and none of them have responded with an answer. So hopefully you can, relative to 2nd Street and the changes, with the potential tolling of the bridge, I'm wondering what type of impact the neighborhoods that we live in the city, even Wormleysburg, I talked to Cheryl about too, if the tolling comes into play, could that be counterproductive to the money that's been spent to re-engineer the streets to make it more resident-friendly and walkable? How does that initiative for tolling the bridge, what are your thoughts on how that could impact what we've already gotten?
Sure. Well, I'm totally against the tolling of the bridge. I understand that the bridge needs to be replaced, and there are ways that we can in my opinion, and this is one of the things that I've said, I've been pretty outspoken about this, they can re-engineer the current widening project for 83 in a way that would save dollars there and allow them to replace the bridge. We did a study with a very well-known national firm, a traffic study of 83, because a lot of the widening, right now the widening you see is out in Colonial Park, and it hasn't really started to come down into the city, but it is planning to come all the way down in the city, and they're increasing it by multiple lanes in each direction. And there's several areas where you don't need as much capacity as what PennDOT is planning for, and the reduction in that would generate hundreds of millions of dollars in savings that could then go towards the bridge replacement in a way that would not require tolling. The city, we can have a longer conversation about this, but in my opinion, PennDOT should be not investing in making the highways even wider, and rather investing in more forms of public transport or other things which are going to make people hopefully less reliant on it. There is this axiom, which is you make it wider and then just more people are going to drive. And that's going to be more pollution and worse for the environment. It's going to take over a lot of land in Harrisburg, which people don't quite realize, because it's not just the actual, you also have to have the buffer zone along the highway as well. It's claiming a lot of homes. But anyhow, back to the traffic study. So we hired Kittleson, which is a nationally recognized group, to do a traffic study. And they basically said, you can re-engineer this, save hundreds of millions of dollars, and will produce better capacity than what it is now. And PennDOT's plan is just basically throwing a massive amount of money at things that it's over-improving something for something which isn't necessary at this time. So that's the short answer to the bridge question. That's how you pay for the bridge. You need to have a policy which is focused more on communities and really engages the community. I haven't found anybody who thinks that tolling the bridge is a good idea, but I will say that I recognize that that they have to come up with money to pay for the bridge replacement. So that's one way to do it. I don't know if replacing the bridge will have as much of an impact on the residents of 2nd Street, however, because we are engineering the street in such a way to encourage people not to use the city as a cut-through. A lot of the traffic on 2nd Street, that northern corridor, is people that maybe are just trying to get through Harrisburg and they don't want to go up the West Shore. They've gone over the bridge. They're basically passing through. If we can divert that traffic, totally the bridge would put a lot more traffic in all the surrounding bridges on Market Street, Harvey Taylor, everywhere, as people would be trying to get back and forth without having to pay the toll. So I don't think it's going to happen. I understand it was the legislature granted that prerogative to PennDOT because there has to be a sort of depoliticized way to talk about how you fund transportation. But and then you can look at the federal transportation dollars, the Biden administration, maybe additional dollars that will come to PennDOT, which will allow them not have to do the toll. So 2nd Street will happen either way. It shouldn't make traffic worse. It should make it better. The tolling the bridge would make traffic patterns worse, but I don't think it would affect 2nd Street because I think we're already going to train people not to use that as a cut through. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
You talked a little bit about police reform, and I'm wondering a whole lot of things, but I think what I'd like to know from you is how do you see the co-responder, the oversight, and the community working group people, how do you see them in conversation with a larger need for criminal justice reform, both in the city and in the county?
Yeah, and that's definitely what it's all about. And these are all steps towards that larger conversation. They're important parts of it, right? Because as I mentioned with the co-responders, when it works properly, it takes people out of the criminal justice system altogether. Now, does it get them the resources that they need from other social and human service providers? It has to work in conjunction with those, but the co-responders are tied in to what resources are available and can hopefully direct people in those ways. But what you don't want is to have people being arrested and taken to Dauphin County Prison or the booking center or whatever for mental health reasons or other things that require treatment rather than punishment. And that's what the co-responder is about. That's also why we need to widen the conversation to include more members of the community, and having a board, an oversight board of people that, and this is unpaid, and this is a volunteer position, but to get people who really know the neighborhoods and know the communities on that oversight board is going to be very helpful, and they can help inform both the police and city government of what types of programs and what types of opportunities are existing in the neighborhoods that perhaps need more funding, need more support. One of the things that we did in addition to the budget was we funded something called the South Allison Hill Safety Project, which was basically a coalition of nonprofits in South Allison Hill that underneath the guise of Tri-County, which basically asked for money for a whole variety of community-led responses. Some, anti-blight measures, new cameras for the neighborhood, a new app development so that neighbors could communicate with one another about crime. And the city funded all of that as well. But we need to strengthen our partners and help make those connections. And the board can do that. The board can bring more accountability and more oversight to what's going on too. And then we talked about the civilianization of the police force, which is a big deal. Prior to this year in Harrisburg, we have had, it's basically uniform patrol and the detectives, and that's your police department. And now we have a whole new division. It's got its own captain, it's got its own uniformed community policing officers, but then it also has this whole civilianized division with a civilian director and with all of these other individuals that can act as, sort of liaisons and with the community. So you put all that together, and it's transformative, and it begins the important conversation, which is a larger conversation that absolutely involves the county, the state, and federal government on what we're going to do with criminal justice reform more generally. But I'm saying on the local level, we're all in listening and trying to be a part of that much necessary change. And all these reforms came out of listening and feedback that the public has given. I think they're going to be really important. And I will also say, if we can hire more civilians and fewer uniformed officers, and you see that dynamic shift, you can see a transformation in policing, and more of an emphasis on community relations, community policing, which I think would benefit everyone as well. And it also helps the city build capacity in a time when it is difficult already to recruit police officers. Because of civil service rules, and because of the current climate for who wants to become a police officer, people say, well, can you have a police department that's more reflective of the community? You can, if you are defining it more broadly to not just include uniformed officers, but also include these types of community service aides and civilians. We can have a lot of city residents and a whole new path for jobs and opportunities for the city. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Local services tax.
Okay. I made it sound so nice, didn't I? Yeah, maybe not so nice for some that are paying.
Oh, no, I completely agree that
Oh, good.
it's necessary.
Okay.
And, up until this past year, I was a commuter. I was happy to pay it. I'm driving on the roads, using the sewer system and everything.
Yeah.
But I remember when it was originally proposed, there was so much backlash.
So much.
But
It's true. For $2 a week, it was a tremendous amount of backlash.
You have it here too, like if you work in all the townships, because I've always worked in Illinois County a lot. We've always, if I move, one time my office, moved me to a different office, assigned me, still within the county, but I had to pay it again, you know what I mean? So it's just.
Well, everyone has it, but ours is higher. That's the.
Okay.
But yeah, I just feel like people are relatively okay with it now. What changed between when it was originally proposed?
I think a lot of hard work. I think it's one of the accomplishments that I'm most proud of for the city, because not only because of what it did in solving that structural deficit, but because it was very improbable that we ever could have built that coalition. I mean, you actually had Republican legislators voting for a bill that was essentially a tax increase on their residents who were commuting into the city. But doing it, I think, in a way that didn't overstate it or make it seem like it was much more than once. It's $2 a week, and yet that makes all the difference for Harrisburg. I think what changed is that Harrisburg went through a receivership, went through Act 47, went through a whole period of financial. I think people became more educated and aware of how the city's finances work and why it was important to have it. And that it wasn't just some sort of frivolous thing that we were trying to do to, get commuters or something like that, but it was necessary for the sustainability of the city. And that took a lot of conversations, and frankly, it took a lobbying team that was focused on bringing Republicans on board, because Democrats never had a problem. But on the state legislature and even for the whole region, we had to bring that whole coalition especially Central Pennsylvania Republicans behind it. And there were people like Greg Rothman and others who, strong Republicans who stood up and said, no, this is important, we're going to do it, and I'm going to convince my colleagues that it's the right thing to do. So I'm pretty impressed we got it done too. It's an amazing thing, and it's a law. And they passed it. And there's more to the story, so to speak. I could tell you more about, how the backroom discussions worked and how you sort of got people to move. But the bottom line is we were able to accomplish something for Harrisburg, which no other city, every other municipality in Pennsylvania would like, but nobody else has been able to do it. So, yeah. Yes?
My last one, so I lived in the city now for about 15 years,
Okay.
and the biggest thing that I've seen is that people have to leave once they have kids, just because of the school districts being so irregular, I guess. Do you have any visions going forward to try to address how to keep people in the city,
Yeah. Do you have any kids yourself?
Oh, yeah, I got 2 kids.
How old are they?
9 and
9 and 4. Okay, so you have an almost kindergartner.
Yes.
Well, I think that the recently approved STEAM Charter Academy is a big deal for the city, and it's a good thing. We can talk about pros and cons of charter schools. We have a charter school in the city that does not perform and should be closed down for lack of performance, and would bring hundreds of people back into the school district. But I think we also have this opportunity with the STEAM Charter, which I think will perform because it has a commitment to small class size. It's starting with just K through 2, so it's just 6 classes, 3 each of kindergarten, first, and second. And it's got 2 former heads of the Department of Education and a lot of community goodwill. So I think that can be transformative for the city, and it starts exactly at that age group that you want to start, which is the young families that moved into the city that now feel that maybe they need to move out because the educational opportunities just aren't there. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it, they aren't there in the Harrisburg School District. And I was one of the proponents of receivership for the district because it was necessary. There was a lot of malfeasance and a lack of focus on academics, and just, we spent lots of money on things that we didn't need to spend money on for sure. But I think that can get cleaned up, and we can see improvements. And I think that they can be compatible with one another. This new STEAM Charter and the sort of rebirth of the Harrisburg School District through receivership. So I'm pretty optimistic. That's one of the most exciting things that happened to Harrisburg in a long time. It's this, I don't know if you've been following it at all. It's relatively new. They're going to do a lottery this year for the first time. They're going to open in the fall. But if you can give people a real option for kindergarten, first, and second grade, I think we can keep people in the city who are otherwise inclined to move. And there are good private school options for sure, but they're expensive, and this is not. So this could be a game changer. Okay, you. Yeah. Yep.
Quick question. So what are some of the changes with the Harrisburg School District since going under receivership that has happened or is going to start happening? I know they're only for 3 years. So it's coming up close soon to being ending. So what are some of the changes that have happened?
Yeah.
And what are some of the things that are set to happen?
Right. So receivership was relatively young when COVID struck. A year or so, and they really hadn't had a full opportunity to do much more than come in and assess the situation. I remember this myself when I was, first elected. You're spending your first year just trying to find out where the money went. They were trying to track down computers and laptops and understand the district's finances and all of that. And then, and they've got an excellent receiver, Janet Samuels. She's very good, an excellent educator. I think the right person for the job. Good superintendent. I mean, things were looking very positive. There's a strong elected school board that is also sort of wants to be a partner in this and is getting the experience and the training to be able to take things back over eventually. But the previous board it had to go at that point in time. And then boom, COVID, and then you've had just one struggle after another. We were hit particularly hard in the Harrisburg School District because of issues with internet access and the fact that it was, many families didn't have the luxury of being able to stay home and provide oversight for their kids on online education. I mean, this was tough, but it was particularly tough in Harrisburg. We've had huge rates of absenteeism, and probably it would be fair to say that really a completely lost year in terms of educational development. Kids are starting to go back to school this month, which is a good thing, and I think by next year we'll be able to get back into the swing of things. We've also seen this mass exodus of kids into cyber charters, which is a problem because and that's where the numbers are going. It's not going to the 2 kindergarten classes at the STEAM charter, and which are in person, by the way. It's not a cyber charter. It's a brick and mortar one, and that's another positive thing. And cyber education is good. I know I have two boys, and one of them really enjoyed the experience with online, and the other really didn't. And they're brothers, and they have the same genetics, but their personalities are just totally different. And different kids need socialization in different ways. And it's been a very difficult year. So I can't pass a judgment on receivership. It will undoubtedly be extended longer because of COVID. Yeah, it will. But it's not meant to be permanent. Just any more so than it was for the city. We were in receivership for a few years, and we pulled out of it, and the school district will pull out of it. And one of the problems the school district has is it has this enormous debt load that unfortunately was tied to the city's debt load, because when we ran out of money borrowing everything we could at the city, at that time the mayor controlled the school district, and he basically bankrupted the school district too. And the city was able to get out of debt. The school district still has a lot lingering over its head. It does have the crown jewel of all properties in Harrisburg, which is the old high school, the old William Penn High School, which is currently on the market. It's for sale. Some would like to see it return to its educational roots and become more of a vocational institution. But nonetheless, what happens to that property is a big deal for Harrisburg. It could be a major game changer for the district. Could bring in a lot of money. Could bring in new residents. Could bring in new opportunities depending on what happens. So a lot going on in the school district. I probably don't have time for a longer answer to that right now. But thanks for the question. Final thought? Final comment? Yes.
That's what I was going to ask about.
Okay, schools, good, yeah. I'm not in favor of a mayoral takeover of the schools. We had that in Harrisburg. It was from 2000 to 2010. Your schools should be run by your school board, but in order to do that, you've got to have enough people sort of running for office and paying attention and wanting to volunteer for a thankless job like being on a school board. But in a functioning city, that's where you need it to be, and we've started to see that in election cycles. And I think we'll be ready to take back control once receivership ends. So, thanks, everybody. This was a great conversation. Appreciate it.